So we've been talking a few times now about American composers. We've talked about Stephen Foster and Scott Joplin. Today we're going to talk about Charles Ives. Let's see. I got to apologize for the sun. He was born in Connecticut, 1874, and he died in New York City in 1954. A modern American composer famous for unconventional piano works and symphonies, one of which, the Third Symphony, won the Pulitzer Prize. The New England childhood of Charles Ives meant so much to him that he refused to visit his hometown later. He couldn't bear to see the changes that had taken place. Ives worshipped his father, a band leader, who was always trying to stretch his ears with unusual sounds. Ives started to learn the piano, the cornet, and the violin, all at age 5, and later the drums. The neighbors complained about that. At 13, he was the youngest church organist in Connecticut. On Saturdays, he played ragtime piano in bars, so we know who did ragtime, right? Scott Joplin. Sometimes his interest in music confused him. What was he doing inside while other kids were playing outside? So he went out for sports, track and tennis, football and baseball, and he excelled at those too. Except as a church organist, Ives never earned money from music. He was a New York businessman and ran a highly successful insurance company. Most people at work had no idea of his secret life. Each evening he would rush home, wrote music that recreated the sounds of his Yankee, New England childhood. Ives married a woman named Harmony, who, despite her musical name, was a registered nurse. They adopted a daughter, Edith. Edith was allowed to play with her dolls under the piano while Ives composed, as long as she was quiet. The family had a horse, a dog, a cat, Christofina, who ate asparagus. Summers were spent in the country, in a spacious house full of books surrounded by hills. Ives kept his old baseball cap in his studio and also pictures of his father and Abraham Lincoln. When Ives' music started becoming better known, he didn't seem to mind its unpopularity. I'm the only one, with the exception of Mrs. Ives, or one or two others perhaps, who likes any of my music. Ives had a heart attack, the first of several, at age 32 and began to live as a recluse. He wrote his music in pencil with such a shaky hand that almost no one could read his writing. He had a photographic memory of everything he'd written, all 10 drawers full of messy manuscripts in his barn. Ives did not own a radio or a record player and rarely used the phone, and would yell at airplane pilots from the ground. He shunned publicity. A Life magazine photographer said he'd never seen a person so terrified of the camera. He wore old soft shirts, old pants, a battered brown felt hat, and an old corduroy jacket. He drove a Model T and was a wild driver. An apple pie American, he liked to write letters to the president suggesting amendments to the Constitution. When Ives felt sad, he would play Onward Christian Soldiers until he felt better. When he felt happy, he sang a nonsense song about codfish hanging in the sky. In the evenings, he would sit before the fire, and Mrs. Ives would read aloud for several hours from Charles Dickens and Jane Austen. Ives liked iced tea and roast pork. He wasn't supposed to eat sweets, but sometimes he did anyway, and the milk he was supposed to drink he threw out in the backyard when people weren't looking, so apparently he didn't like milk. After he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Music, he gave away the money. Prizes are for boys. I'm grown up, he explained. Ives had his final heart attack at age 79. One of his uncompleted works was the Universe Symphony, meant to be performed outdoors by orchestras on the tops of several hills. So there's one of our American composers, Charles Ives. You can certainly find him on Pandora, and I know there's music that he's written that you're familiar with that you probably don't know you're familiar with. Okay? Well, I hope you enjoyed it. See you later.